Last time on Cyberpunk Edgerunners.
I've made a decision, which I can do, because I have all the power as the editor. I am editing T, and I am evil. And the evil me is I'm going to cut Comment Spotlight for this video for right now, just to remove it out, because it's the thing that takes the longest to edit. And so I'm going to remove it out and think about doing it later. Comment Spotlight on the Patreon, or... Comment Spotlight. I'm going to limit this as much as I can. Here's what's up. There are a bajillion interesting comments on this video. Like a bajillion of interesting comments on this video. And I will do what I can to go through as many of the interesting ones as I can, and we'll see how it goes. But I'm going to start off with the top comment, which is from Vartik. Vartik, by the way, I still love your profile pic, and I love that Vartik's profile pic on the Discord rotates. It's a GIF thing, and it's really cool. Okay. 5844. A few people pointed out, but I will write it down here as well. The subtitles were wrong here. It's supposed to be pick socket, as in pickpocket for sockets. Yeah, super simple, super simplistic. Just a failure of the dub titling. I don't know why people care so much. Like, that really genuinely doesn't bother me in the slightest, and it doesn't even really matter. It took me a few seconds of being like, I wonder what this is about. I guess it doesn't matter. And like, the impact that has on my actual experience of watching the thing is essentially zero. So I think people get really up in arms about subtitles. But first off, I'm watching the dub, and the subtitles aren't what I'm watching in the first place. It's not, I don't care. I'm using the dub as the primary mode of integration with the thing. And beyond that, like who cares? If this was your primary way of getting the content and getting an understanding of the thing, then it would make sense to be up in arms about misspellings or mistakes, but doesn't seem to be worth all of the vitriol and the like bad subs that's going on in the comments. So I don't know. 20921, that logo is 6th Street, which are a gang comprised of mostly ex-military or ex-security retired veterans. They view themselves as a militia focused on establishing order and justice in their gang territory, but they are mostly vigilantes and thugs. So that's a reason that the symbology that we got is an extension of a lot of conservative symbology that you get in the United States. There's a tendency moving toward Punisher symbols on the conservative right, and especially around the all cops are bastards versus thin blue line weird symbological debate that's going on, that's just utterly bullshit on both directions, because obviously all cops are not bastards, and obviously you shouldn't protect all cops from all harm. So maybe there's something in the middle, and both sides are getting way too extreme about the whole problem. But I don't know. I just am researching it and trying to figure it out. They have an American theme to them, yeah. Well, I mean, it's Night City is in the United States, so they have an American theme to them, hence the logo, absolutely. And there are a bunch of things about the logo that we talked about. It's hemmed in by thorns, and it's not a crown of thorns. It's a circle of thorns that prevents new ideas from coming in. It's not like the circle that I wear, which is connected and is like a different kind of symbol, right? It's a looped circle that doesn't have a helix to it. That's just pain inward and outward, and that's not it. And then the flag's behind and the stars behind it, it's all disintegrated. It's a really good symbol for a really bad symbol. You know what I mean? It's a really well executed evil symbol, and that's kind of cool, because you look back and there are some evil symbols in our history. Well, the Nazis took the symbol of peace and progress and change, flipped it, and spiraled it into death, destruction, chaos, and hatred. Seems like symbols matter, because they literally flipped it and did what the reverse of the original four curved sign was meant to emulate. They flipped it around and made it spin backward. Crazy. So the symbol that I saw of that gang thing, that vigilante gang, absolutely nailed faulty vigilante who's too violent and doesn't have their shit together. Really quality. 22754. David doesn't like carbonated drinks, that's why he spits it out. I think it's a bit of a foreshadow how he's focused on the indirect kiss part, seduction, so he unwillingly drinks something that he doesn't like, taking the bait. Zoom out and you realize that it's similar to how she is keeping him here until the people she called can arrive. Nailed it. It's a microcosm of the later interaction that they're going to have, and that's a really cool thing to call out. I'll also mention that I have never met somebody who was like this, but I've got a friend, my roommate, who is incapable of drinking carbonated drinks. Now he can force himself if he has to, but he finds them extraordinarily painful. And it has something to do, I think it's down to a genetic level, and there's a gene marker that you can find for it as far as I'm aware, but it's something to do with like there's a chemical bond that happens between the carbon atoms or the carbon gas and his taste buds that creates an actual literal pain response for him. It's not the process of bubbling, it's something about the carbonation. And it's really weird because he's totally fine with Pop Rocks. He actually likes Pop Rocks, but he takes one sip of a carbonated beverage and he's ow, 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 like in literal and very legitimate pain that I cannot deny, and he's not faking, and it's not just that he's trained himself to think that the stuff is painful. It actually hurts him. So that's really weird. And maybe David's got something like that. I wouldn't know. But certainly your insights about the focus on the indirect kiss and being focused on the femininity and sexuality and intrigue of this amazing woman that he meets, because I am, right? Like I'm focused on and interested in and distracted by her throughout. I'll bet there are a bunch of little foreshadowing things throughout the episode and ways that she looks in different directions that sort of imply that maybe she's leading him along, right? But I don't know, because I was distracted by the really fascinating manic pixie dream girl thing, right? That she was at least playing the role of, because she's not really that. She's that, and she's something else. Or at least she's capable of wearing that mask, and she's capable of wearing other ones. So that's pretty cool. And 228-24, during this scene, you can notice Lucy's eyes flicker. That's how it looks when you're taking a call via cyberware. She's probably on the phone with the people who just entered her apartment. Bingo. All from the beginning. So even those really soft, close moments between those two humans are a form of exploitation and a form of theft and a form of lie. So where's the value in this world? Where's the love, man? Where's the understanding and the communication? And the answer is it's nowhere. There was a little bit of it between David and his mom. There was a flash of it at the very end from the Ripper doc, but only barely. And he had to be forced so hard into giving him any kind of legitimate advice. A flash. And there was the feeling that there could have been something between him and Lucy. It all dissolves into lie and betrayal. And what does that say? Well, it says that in this world, people put gain and profit and individual theft and power above the ability to connect. I know that some of you are going to say that's an inevitable result of capitalism, and I just don't think that's true. It's an inevitable result of unchecked capitalism, and there's seriously a difference. Okay, good comment, Vardic. Thank you very much. Goro-chan. I just want to say I loved your breakdown, thank you, and that the rolling down the highway scene always emotionally destroys me. From David's POV, Lucy is the only thing that matters. Nothing else even exists at that moment. Yeah, the light's going behind her. She's just on a stage above him, and he's just looking up at her smile and her joy and her insanity, her amazing insanity, her amazing crazy. She's the whole world to him for those 10 seconds. Yeah. JAV Gamer, I think the reason the Moon BD scene between the two of them is made to look like doing the sex is because it's a type of intimacy that seems to be largely lost in Night City. And it really does look like the sex. They're on a pink circular bed with like lights above, which is a love hotel idea, which are an interesting concept actually. And I'm curious why we don't have more of them in the Americas, because they're red light districts and love hotels are pretty. I mean, you can get a chibi hotel or whatever, but I don't know that concept really exists in the same way that it does in Japan or Korea, especially, is where I'm aware of it, just from manhwas. Because if you go read any sexy manhwas. I actually really like sexy manhwas and webcomics. I think they're very fun. And I think the Korean elements of like the way that they draw pornography, they're all kind of samey, but the way that they draw pornography and the restrictions that they have on pornography make some of the stories that they tell that are pornographic in nature somewhat more compelling to me. I don't know. But often the characters will meet and go for a drink, and then they'll end up at a love hotel, and they'll fuck at a love hotel, and that's the way that people get that shit done. And it's an interesting concept, and it's like, But that could be really helpful if you don't have your own place to go back to or something like that. Anyway, back to Jav Gamer's comment. From my cultural understanding of the practice, sex is a spectrum between the two ends of lovemaking, a show of closeness and partnership between people, and fucking, a pleasure act with no personal connection. With Night City being a hypersexualized place where sex is sold on every street corner, it's fair to say that it's been delegated more to the second area of that scale. And yet Lucy showing David her secret and safe space here that she's never shown anybody else, that as far as we know, almost like her virginity, bingo, exactly like her virginity is the implication, is an act of vulnerability and intimacy that has been shoved aside in favor of impersonal connections with people. I think actually you've missed it. It's been shoved aside in favor of impersonal connections with systems, because nobody is actually connected to other people. They're connected with impersonal systems. I'm one of those ace people you mentioned, so this is coming from an outside perspective in a way, so feel free to tell me if I'm off here. I don't think you're entirely off here, but I will echo Mercure250's comment after yours, which is, actually, I'd say the other end of the spectrum is masturbation rather than fucking. While fucking, you at least have some kind of contact with someone else, even if only physical. But actually, it's not really purely physical, since there is the mutual consent and respect and trust needed when you offer up your body to someone else. You get none of that with masturbation. And, I mean, look at how many people are using masturbating machines. Exactly. The show is clear on that. I'll say something else about the purely physical nature of sex. I think that's just not true. It's just impossible to separate, and we talked about this in Mushoku Tensei, I think episode 12 and 13. It's impossible to separate sex from the neurochemical changes that occur to you when you have sex with another person. And those are pheromonal, and those are chemical, and they're bonding, and they're also a bunch of other extraordinarily complicated chemical soups that fucking change you. It's not just physical, man. And we take sex lightly at our peril. I don't mean, again, I want to be clear, I don't mean that in a puritanical, like, everyone should save their virginities until marriage sort of a way. I don't fucking believe that. I don't think that's true. But I think we shouldn't take it super lightly, and I think maybe fully, like, over-the-top, no-strings-attached, rampant hookup culture might not be as empowering for men or women or anybody as we might otherwise think. It seems to be disempowering, and it seems to empty your life out of meaning when you pursue just sexual gratification for its own sake instead of that sort of mutualistic connection with real other people. And I think that's what we're trying to angle at in Cyberpunk, is that connection element seems to be missing in the real world. And so, like science fiction often does, we take that element of the real world that's going poorly, I think, and we extrapolate it out into the future in all the worst ways. And we say, what could this be? And it could be exactly what it already is, which is people jerking off constantly and not going and pursuing something that I think really makes life fulfilling, which is like interpersonal connection. I think interpersonal connection is the spice, or some of it. It's one chunk. There are individual things, and there's like working, and there's working toward a passion, and there's moving toward a goal. But then sex, for those of us who are not asexual, relationship with a person that you're invested in or interested in, and the communication that goes around that, and the friendship that must be built around that if you're going to do it effectively and sustainably and in a way that doesn't break both of you. Man, I think it's important. And so it reflects on me, because I've got a problem in my life, which is that I don't have it. I've been celibate for years, and not necessarily voluntarily, although I wouldn't call myself an incel, because that's stupid. It's just stupid, and like I think incel implies giving up, right? It implies that you've switched your identity from the kind of person who might have sex in the future to the kind of person who's just never gonna make it, man. And that's blackpilling, and that's death of the soul. I think it's bad. So a big spew there, and I hope that I pissed some people off with it. But if I did, think about it and come at me and try to do so concisely and effectively, and I'd love to talk to you about it. Nomnobot has a comment that starts off talking about Lucy's voice. Regarding Lucy's voice, it was interesting how you mentioned something about not liking it at first, but then praised it during the moon dance scene. I think it's because she was putting on an act and was manipulating David as soon as she realized he has the Sandevistan, while she was being completely genuine on the moon. It is her private space and truly her dream. I choose to believe it came across in the voice acting, since I know how good she is in later episodes. I'd believe it. And then the second part is the part that I really want to address, which is, also, I get how you arrived at it, but the idea that a corporation, a huge one at that, is trying to save/improve the world in a cyberpunk setting is pretty funny. Is that even a thing? A corporation in cyberpunk setting or in real life being motivated by anything other than money or power? Yes, actually, I think it is. And also, I think being motivated by money or power are not inherently evil things. I'm motivated by money. I'm motivated by power too. If I had more power, I could change the world more effectively. If I had more money, I could build better systems for myself. Money and power are pretty useful motivations. And we dismiss them at our peril because they're some of the better motivations that we've got. Now, being motivated for those for their own sake is very different from being motivated to power for a purpose. I think there are a lot of companies, because of the way that capitalist systems arrange themselves, there are a lot of companies that miss the mark, and they aim their goal toward just profit. And I think that's the fundamental flaw, because if they were aimed toward change or improvement on some other metric, which I think can still be folded into the profit metric, it's just that we're really bad at evaluating what's actually profitable. And so are giant companies. Because what's actually profitable for a giant company is treating all of its systems and all of its workers properly. That's what makes the company the most successful. And the most successful companies, I think, for the most part, do exactly that. And when I say success, I don't mean necessarily the most financially viable, because they're not quite the same thing. I mean the most successful, the most sustainable, the ones that are producing good products that are continuing to grow continuously. Companies like, you can hate me for saying this, and a couple of years ago, I would hate myself for saying this. I think Google is fundamentally not an evil corporation. Do I know if they're good? I don't know about that. But I don't think they're evil. I don't think it's evil. I think Google is actually dedicated to spreading information. So there's a giant corporation that, I'll tell you, I really believe, and I believe it because of their actions, because in every one of their platforms that I've been a part of, most of which are entirely free, they have provided free and interesting services to people that really change the world. Gmail is the primary email provider for most people. For most people. I mean, there's Yahoo and Outlook and MSN and all these other things, but Gmail is the primary for almost everybody. Everybody's got a Gmail. Why? Because it's free and it's one of the best email providers in the entire universe, and it's constantly being updated. It's an extraordinary piece of technology, and they give it away for free. Now, it's not entirely free. They steal your data. Okay. All right. We can talk about that at a different time, whether that's viable, whether that's valid, what to do with it. But here's the other thing that they do. Google is an ad-funded economy, and I got some problems with advertisements. But I'll say this. Ads work, and I think advertisement is necessary and useful and has utility because it shows people, individuals, who wouldn't otherwise see the things that they're looking for, what they're looking for. Broadly, from my experience, Google leverages its advertising and AdWords capabilities to provide people with information about things that they might actually want and things that might actually be useful for them. So when you type something into Google and a couple of sponsored results come up, usually those sponsored results are as or more relevant than the next couple of results. So is there evil going on in that sponsorship? I don't know. Is there corruption going on in it? Is it subverting the system? I don't know. But at least the parts that are ads that are sponsored are specifically delineated, and you can tell the difference. And they seem to be the right things. They seem to be as close as the system can get to actually delivering what you're looking for. And the system does not have to be like that. And Facebook and Instagram prove it outright. Because Instagram ads are not like that at all. Not one bit. Instagram will get into its algorithm the idea that, man, you really need to buy a pair of gym-specific underwear. This is what I got on Instagram before I fully dropped off of the site for a while. I was scrolling through, underwear ad pops up. I hadn't looked for underwear anywhere. Hadn't bought new underwear for weeks and months. Hadn't looked at anybody selling underwear or searched for underwear anywhere. The system just thought, this is a guy who looks at some gym content. This is a guy who looks at this kind of content. He has looked at certain kinds of clothing before because I looked at Barefoot Shoes, Bearfoot, which are Chris Duffin's shoe brand. I looked at those before. So maybe he'll buy lifting apparel. Maybe he'll buy exercise apparel. And somehow it figured out underwear. So I scroll through and it's like post, underwear ad, post, underwear ad, post, underwear ad, post, underwear ad. No other ad, just scrolling through the feed, just buy underwear, buy underwear, buy underwear. It's just convinced that that's what I want. And I'm sitting here like, I got plenty of underwear. I don't need none of this shit. Google doesn't do that, as far as I can tell. Google goes, it looks like you've been searching for underwear. This might work. What about this? Have you tried these? It doesn't seem to be forcing itself down my throat. So, I can't speak to the motivations of Google as a corporation. I just can't. But I can speak to their actions and the way that they've done their processes, and the fact that they've made YouTube free. The fact that they've made YouTube free, the fact that the most powerful search engine that we have access to, and it still is, and it's flawed in a lot of ways, but it is one of the most powerful entities that we have access to, and it's incredible. It's free. Because of greed? Because of money and power? I mean, maybe long term, maybe Google decided that the best way to profit was to actually be good. It used to be a part of their company creed, do no evil. It's not anymore. And that scares me. But the ideas about it are still built into the systems that underlie the company. I don't mean this to be a big rant about defending Google. Google's got all sorts of flaws. It's a system like any other. In the same way that I think that by and large, so, okay, I'll say this. By and large, I think Google is one of the best systems and best run and most ethical systems in the computing space. That doesn't mean that it's anywhere near perfect, and it is entirely flawed. Similarly, by and large, I think market economies, and I won't use the word capitalism, I mean market economies, because I'm actually quite a fan of some of the socialist mixed model economies that are in like Norway and Sweden, and having gone and investigated them more effectively, I'm a fan of a lot of those elements, and I think that they solve a lot of the fundamental problems of like providing the bottom of Maslow's hierarchy of needs so that people can pursue the things that they actually want and need to pursue in their lives. And so I think that's where we need to move toward. And conservative resistance toward socialism is just foolish. Conservative resistance toward communism is not foolish. Communism is bad and evil and wrong, and it kills millions of people, and it has killed millions of people, and it will again if you try to institute it again. So market economies work. They do. They actually do. And by work, people have questioned this a whole bunch. What do I mean by work? What do you mean that the system is working? I mean we're not all dead, and the electricity is going, and the water is flowing, and most of us have access to food. Now, that said, 994 million people are going to be starving this year in the nation, or in the country, or in the globe. And that's about the same percentage of people that will be starving out of the 8 billion people on the planet that will be food insecure in the United States. So it's not thebombdiggity.com. It's not perfect, but it hasn't completely fallen apart yet. And maybe there's something to that, because every time we've tried a different system, it's completely fallen apart immediately. Immediately. Every time we've tried a core communist regime, it has fallen apart within a decade. Like immediately. And within a couple of years, it's pivoted toward being capitalist again because it doesn't fucking work. Look at the history of the USSR. Look at the history of it. Because they tried the communist thing and it didn't work and they pivoted right back to capitalism and they'd already fucked everything up too bad. Because they took all the farms away from people who knew how to farm and gave them to people who didn't know shit about anything. So maybe the people who know how to run farms and know how to run businesses should be running businesses. And maybe that can happen organically. And that's sort of what the market economy says. Anyway, I don't mean to get so heated. I kind of do, because I'm interested in these questions. And I'm getting more of a background in these questions, which is awesome. And the reason for that is... Where's my Marx angle? Oh, yeah. Here. Oh, yeah. Oh, books. Oh, books. So, Marx, I've been reading bits and pieces of it. I don't like Marx's writing style at all. He strikes me as a very intelligent man who is very bad at evaluating his own initial underlying assumptions. That's the thing that I've gotten. And also very very revolutionary in his language, which you would expect from a writer who is capable of galvanizing an entire populace. And all of that turns me off immensely. I'm going to read the whole damn book regardless, but I find the way that he writes to be off-putting. And I find that the explanations that are given by the editor to be useful and helpful, but a lot of apologetics, a lot of, well, what he really did, he didn't really mean that. What he really meant was this. And I read the thing and I'm like, no, he really meant what he fucking said, which was some scary shit. And there's some scary shit in here. There are also some fantastic ideas in here. And I would be loath to dismiss the one because of the other. Because as I believe, everything comes down to something like balance. So having some Marx inside my brain is going to be useful moving forward. And not just to criticize it. That's something really important that people do all the time. They go and investigate something just like, well, I want to find out why I disagree with this person. And then they come at it from that perspective. And just like Marx seems unable to evaluate his fundamental underlying assumptions, which are something along the lines of capitalism is the source of all evil in the world. And then he goes on to try to prove that, which reminds me immensely of all the proofs done by Thomas Aquinas of the existence of God. Fantastic, beautiful logical proofs, really well executed. All built on the fundamental underlying assumption that there is a thing that you could call God and that proving it might be possible, which is hilarious and utterly ridiculous because, well, we know how science works now, and we didn't then. And so we know how to come at a problem from a perspective of ignorance, not a perspective of already knowing what's going on. And frankly, Marx is not a scientist, not even a little bit, as far as what I've read. And his historical knowledge is not there. And as far as I can tell, his understandings of these systems that he is critiquing, not good enough. Not good enough. He's a very smart man with not enough understanding of the world. And so he's in that Dunning-Kruger space where he thinks he's capable of making all of these critiques of systems that are so much more complicated than he can imagine that it's like a child trying to critique a brain surgeon. It's something like that. And believing that they understand that if you were to just yank out that goopy bit, it would make everything work better. Just yank it out, man. It's the capitalist goopy bit that's causing all the problems. The kid knows it. I mean, the kid just knows it. There must be some goopy bit inside the head that's causing daddy to die. So surgeon boy, just go in and yank out the goopy bit and daddy will live. And of course, we all know that if you yank out the goopy bit inside the dad's skull, he's just gonna die. And that's what happens when you yank capitalism, or markets, let's say, or modes of effective equivalent exchange, you might say, the fundamental underlying rules of our universe, you might say, because they're literally hydrogen ion exchange is what mediates all functional systems in your body. Okay, anyway, I'm getting way beyond myself. Capital is energy, money is energy, it's power, it's work, it's important, it's necessary. If you take those systems out, societies seem to collapse completely, and the people that those societies support, the people that rely upon those social systems to support them, die. They all fucking die. Really bad. They freeze in the winter, and they starve during the harvest time, and they run out of water when it's raining outside, and the electricity goes out, and they burn in the deserts, and they freeze in the mountains, and everything falls apart. And everything falls apart anyway. That's entropy. So finding a system that works even a little bit is magic, and we throw away systems that work even a little bit at our peril. Truly at our peril, at the deaths of millions of people. We've done it before. We've tried it before, and nobody's putting down a hard line to say, that shit doesn't work, man. It is wrong to call yourself a communist. It implies that you do not know what the fuck you are talking about. Okay. Anger. I hope that anger leads to some interesting discussions from some of the people who are communists who are in my chat, because I'm insulting you for a reason. It's not to tell you to fuck off and stop saying what you're saying. It's to come at me with concise, well thought through arguments, better than I've done, because I'm flubbing it, and part of that is part of that I'll blame, and I'll give the excuse that I'm a little tired and a little bit upset. But mostly it's because I want to start the discussion, and being vitriolic seems to get some discussions going sometimes. So come at me, criticize what I'm saying, but don't nitpick what I'm saying, please. Don't come at the little tiny things. Look at the broad picture. Look at the broad picture and come at it. And oh God, if I get the argument of that's like, well, nobody's really trying to institute communism again. Nobody's really trying to destroy all the capitalist systems. It's like, that's not true. That is not true. Maybe in your echo chamber they're not, but my echo chamber is pretty broad, and there are definitely people trying to tear down all systems. Isaac Ho writes, man, I haven't watched you in a while, but these past few videos blew me out of the water. Nice. And while I know you don't take praise like a sponge, yeah, it's hard for me. I'm trying to get better at it. I've been receiving a lot more praise and a lot more criticism in the last time, and that's because I've opened myself up to all of it, and it's come in a couple of different floods of different kinds, and it's been really interesting. While I know you don't take praise like a sponge, I must express my admiration for my own sake more than yours. Your ideas, your analysis, your life experience, your concise but unfiltered self-expression. I'm a high school senior. I haven't had much life experience, but I can say without a doubt that I will remember this for the rest of my life. I am so glad. I wish I could say more, but I just can't articulate it. That's okay. That's okay. Wish upon that star of articulation, of the ability to speak your truth, because that seems to be really important. I believe in you. Just know that what you're doing is substantive, both a role model and an encouragement to us fire-eyed shonens. That's it. That's the one, man. Go watch the Psychotrists talk. I talk about a little bit about exactly that. I would like to prove that the shonen protagonist mentality is one of the best mentalities. Emblematized by, let's take Naruto as an example. Naruto's a dumb kid, and he doesn't have much skill. But he gets sort of gifted a little bit of skill in the one jutsu that he gets, and he goes, I want to become the best ever. He wants to become Hokage, right? He wants to become a leader. Well, what does that mean? What does it mean to be a leader? Well, he doesn't know, and that's okay. What he does in the very beginning is he points far beyond the possible, and everybody goes, you're an idiot, kid, you'll never get there. Well, guess what, motherfuckers? Dedication, hard work, finding the right friends, eliminating the toxic ones, fighting with your foil, with your other self, who is Sasuke, who narratively is his foil and is his shadow and is all the other elements of him. Being unendingly positive and optimistic, incorporating the monster that is a part of his birth, right? And identifying with it and becoming capable of causing harm. Expanding his skills outward. That way of being, the shonen protagonist way of being, the fire-eyed shonen, I think that's the best way of being. Or at least one that can work for a lot of people, especially for young men, and for young women too. And so I'd love to share that thing that I think is true. Because what I did was I started acting like a shonen protagonist. That's how I changed. And this came up in my Discord a couple times, so I want to express this pretty clearly and express something. So I was talking about how I want to inspire people to pursue art instead of pursuing relief from pain, you might say. I see a lot of people pursuing any sort of relief from pain. And the person that I think of that is most emblematic of this is I met a guy at Bevmo the other day. I was checking out and he asked me for my ID, and I have my wallet is it's a pad folio, so it's got a little pad of paper in it, and I keep a nice pencil in it. So I opened it and I pulled out the ID and I showed it to him, and he saw the thing. He was like, "Whoa, that's a cool pad, and that's really interesting that you carry that around with you, and that's a cool pencil." I look at this guy's eyes, and I have this impression of him, which is he had some tattoos and some earrings and bright blue eyes that looked dead to me. They looked sad and dead inside, like there was no light in his eyes. And he was a little anxious and a little jittery. And I don't mean these as criticisms, it's just what I observed about the person. And he seemed absolutely like shocked when I engaged with him and made eye contact with him and actually spoke back to him. And desperate for connection and desperate for humanism. He was working as a cashier at Bevmo, at a liquor store, essentially. And I told him about the pencil that I have. It's a Staedtler drafting pencil. I love them. I think they're fantastic. I've actually got... Where's my other one? This one's not a Staedtler. This is an Eagle Turquoise Prestomatic 3377. This was my grandfather's drafting pencil. And I've had it for a while. And the great thing about a good drafting pencil, or lead holder, you might call them, is that well, they're basically unbreakable because they're all aircraft grade aluminum and steel and spring steel and stuff. And you can just buy big 2mm leads and just go at it. They're glorious pencils. But I've got this nice pencil, and he saw it, he noticed it. He said, "Whoa, that's really cool. I love pencils. I'm an artist." And when he said, "I'm an artist," I was looking at the guy, and I didn't say any of this because I'm not a fucking asshole. I'm an asshole, but I try not to be. I didn't say this, but I thought it. And he said, "I'm an artist." And he's sitting there being a cashier. And I went, in my head, I'm like, "No, you're not. No, you're not." Because being an artist is a process of doing. And you're not doing the artisting. You're being a cashier. And the two aren't mutually exclusive, and you can do one in the pursuit of another, and you might be going to school for art. But I got the distinct impression that was not the case. That this was someone who had sublimated his own passion for art in order to survive. That was the impression that I got, and I could be totally wrong. But I've met a lot of people like that. I've got a roommate who's like, "Oh man, I'm an actor." He hasn't acted in like 3 years. Doesn't have a plan to pursue acting, isn't going to school for acting, isn't pursuing acting classes, is going to school for something else because that will make him more money, he thinks. He's not an actor. He'd like to be, but it's a wish over the horizon. It's not something that he's identifying with. I want to inspire people to leave behind their slow death, because that's what it is, and that's what it feels like. And that's what I experienced. Leave behind the slow death that you achieve as a cog in some grand system where you feel like your work is meaningless, and your work actually is meaningless. Because that's the thing about cashiers, is that auto checkout systems do it about just as well. Almost about just as well. So why would that job matter? Well, it only matters because humans are a little cheaper sometimes than the auto checkout systems or something like that. But those empty jobs, man, they're death. Soul death for people. They tear people apart. And they've torn me apart. Now, I was working in intellectual labor as a programmer, as a coder. First in some startup companies, and then in some interesting startup companies, and then sort of freelance for a couple of different people for a couple of different reasons. And it was drudgery. Meaningless, building meaningless tools on meaningless systems that weren't even dedicated toward pursuing interesting goals. Building data analysis systems for people to use in presentations to sell bad ideas to corrupt corporations. Building shitty cobbled together jury-rigged systems in order to sell ideas to venture capitalists that were never going to go and take off, but at least you could extract a few $1 million from a venture capitalist, and me as a programmer, I'd see no portion of that, but the boss that I was working for would, and they'd be able to get rich off of my work. That kind of shit kills you. And I had that distinct impression that I was slowly becoming more and more depressed, working for other people and working at a computer, doing nothing of interest, not pursuing my art. I felt myself dying. And so I chose to die. Die or be free. That was the choice that I made. And people in my Discord have been criticizing this today, and they've been coming at it from a perspective that they have not been here long enough to understand where I'm coming from. They haven't watched my earliest videos. So I recommend that anybody who's here, who doesn't know where I came from, goes and watches the video Eggs on this channel. It has a pink thumbnail, EGGS, Eggs. And I'll tell you what that video is. When I started this channel, I started at the beginning of a month. I started the Patreon and I put everything up and I dropped a bunch of videos. I dropped the whole set of Lane reactions, the whole set of Batum reactions, and I think the whole set of one of the Full Metal Panic reactions and a couple of other things. I dropped them all at once and just threw them out there. No idea what I was doing, just trying. And I started Legend of the Galactic Heroes and I started all these things. And at the start of that month, I had a fridge full of food and no money. None. And when I say no money, I don't mean I had a couple $1,000s in savings. I mean I had no money. I mean by the end of the month, I was going to starve. because I wasn't going to be able to buy a bag of rice, for example, or a can of tuna. Nothing. Not one thing. Nothing. Death. Literal death. Right there, right over the corner, right over the bend. That's where I started. And I did it because my dog died. And her death reflected upon me and taught me about mortality. And in the revelation of my own mortality, I could not continue on doing what I was doing. And I think that is true of every person who is working as the thing that is not what they should be working as. And there are differences and there are exceptions. There are ways that you can work on one job in order to enable another job, and that's a different thing. But mostly I see people killing their passions, giving up on their art, giving up on their dreams. And it's the Punpun story as well. Giving up on their passion, giving up on their art, giving up on their dreams because it's just too damn hard, and the world tells them that they won't survive that way. Which is a lie. It's a lie. And a lot of people believe in the lie. And so it's a very powerful lie. And it's a very compelling one, which is that, well, nobody can ever make it. And the other side of the compelling lie is that anybody who does make it is just lucky. Fucking bullshit. I deny that. People say this to me too, and they said this in the Discord. And at first I was like, yeah, sure, I'll just let that slide. I'm not going to let that slide. Luck has nothing to do with it. You think my channel was luck? Go look at a graph. Go look at a graph of my subscriber base. Go look at a graph of my Patreon base. It has nothing to do with luck. It's a grind. It is work. It is because I am producing value. It is because I am exchanging that value with you in an ethical way. Now, there's luck inherent to it, but I don't think so. I think the system just works. The one that I built. The system of Patreon and early access and YouTube and voting access and Discord and communication and discussion. The system works. And the system works in this way. If I produce content that has literal and legitimate value to individuals who are out there and they are capable of getting it and seeing it, they give me money. There's no luck to it. There's value production to it. There's no luck to producing a good company either. Because I've watched a bunch of companies fold and be like, guess we were just lucky, or guess we were just unlucky in Silicon Valley. Bullshit. Bullshit. The ones that can attribute themselves to luck are the ones who are doing the venture capitalist hook thing, right? They're doing something false, or they're getting a massive valuation that they don't deserve, or things like that. But man, the ones that are sustainably successful aren't lucky. They've got good foundations. And I think the same is true of every sustainably good YouTuber. I watched a video the other day that kind of blew my mind. It was a video of a bunch of compilations of Mr. Beast talking about the way that he built his YouTube career. And you know, people are like, Mr. Beast, super lucky, got ultra viral. Not even a chance. Not how he sees it. He sees it as a grind that he got together with a few smart people and they grinded for years, figuring out what it is that makes content compelling, what makes viral videos go viral. And then he started doing them. And it worked. Why? Luck? Bullshit. Bullshit. Corruption? Greed? Evil? Exploitation? Bullshit. Excuses. Excuses. You're just willing to work for somebody else. That's the issue. It's most people's issue with capitalism is that they're just working for somebody other than themselves. Well, here's the secret. You could work for yourself. Anybody could. You can own your own business where you go house to house and you clean houses, and nobody takes 1% of your fucking profits. Not 1%. You could own that business, and you could run it, even if you have no skills. Whatever it is that you're capable of doing and passionate about, find a way to make it your own business and then work for your goddamn self. That's capitalism. You can't do that under a communist system, and it's fundamentally necessary for the human soul. So stop working for somebody else. How about that? You want to take out capitalism? You want to take out the evils of monopoly? Stop working for giant corporations and start working for yourself. And if you have to work for bigger structures, unionize. And if you're in a system where you're not working for bigger structures, get into guilds. And I think that's something that we need. I think we need guilds for individual producers of art and various crafts and human production things. I think we need guilds. It's also the solution to a large extent against the prolificness of AI art and the prolificness of Chinese machine-made, auto-generated, copy-pasted, stolen trash. For example, this is a fellow's Corvo coffee thing. You can get 30 from 30 different companies that are functionally, as far as you can tell, identical to this, except that they're pooped out by a machine in a way that this one isn't. And I don't know if I would trust their quality of production, even though they're carbon copies. But if everything is machine makeable, where do the human artists go? I was thinking about this in terms of the video by Steven Zapata Art on AI art and art generation. There's a comment on it that's like, when I saw it, it was like the third top comment, but it was somebody from China talking about the pottery industry, because potters went out of business because they figured out ways to 3D print any form of pottery generation and make perfect copies of whatever you'd created. And what's really interesting is that in the long term, it led to a higher valuation for human-generated art. Why? Because the artists, the creators, the potters banded together and started using symbols and representations to demonstrate that they were making stuff by hand and doing it with quality and love and care. And the computer-generated machines that are those machine-based corporations, they're in large part, like, a lot of them are basically AI-driven. They all function the same way. They all create carbon copies of the same thing. They were making their pottery and stuff out of mediocre chemical-infused clays, and they weren't safe for human consumption. And so the people revolted against it and went back to the handmade stuff. And that's interesting. It's really cool. But there are solutions to these underlying problems, and I think those solutions happen at the individual level, not at the systemic level, because systems are a fractal representation of all of the individuals within them, not vice versa. Not vice versa. You don't go and you change the system, you change yourself. People are so willing to put the burden of responsibility on everybody else. It's everybody else's fault that the system isn't working. The truth is that if you changed your perspective, the system would work differently for you. That's something that I found out while going to the doctor's office. I've got all these ideas like that are in my head, and some of them are true. Like the pharmaceutical system is evil. Doctors are just trained as pharma reps. Partly true. There are tons of opioid epidemics, blah, 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 blah. But you go in with all these ideas that are like, well, the doctor system in the United States is wrong and bad. And then I go in and I'm paying for health insurance, and I'm not paying that much for it because I've got a tax credit because the system is working. I paid $1 for health insurance. I bumped my health insurance up to a very high quality plan before I went in because I was scared that I would come out with a terminal cancer diagnosis and might have to be spending a lot of money on healthcare bills. So I paid for good health insurance. But I went in, and I could have been on the zero health insurance. That would have cost me $1 a month. I went in and I was seen quickly by an experienced doctor who gave me the time of day and literally took the time to really talk with me about some of the questions that I had. And I got good care, and I've got good test results, and the tests have been done, and all of the things that I needed done have been done. And as soon as I stepped into the system with the idea that maybe it will actually work in a way that's effective, it organized effectively around me. So maybe if you interfaced with capitalism in a mutualistic and effective way, the way that you think that capitalism should work, maybe it would. Maybe it would. What an interesting thing. Would that solve the corporate greed? No, but it would be a start, because at least you wouldn't be contributing to the corruption. That's a pretty big deal, because everybody seems to be contributing to the corruption, except the people who are willing to step outside of the system. And I get that there are risks inherent in that, but they're worth it. And I've had people criticize me and say that the ability to take those risks is a privilege of your privilege. It's a privilege of your wealth. And to some extent, they're right. I had a computer, at least, and a camera, right? So I had the ability to start posting stuff, and that's a huge privilege. But I also had no food and no money. So I didn't exactly have a safety net. Not a little bit, not one bit. So to say that it was a privilege of privilege is just false, because I was going to be dead in a couple of months. And I don't mean from the starvation. I mean I was going to kill myself. Because if I had kept on doing what I was doing and coding, I could not survive on this world anymore. It was untenable. I think a lot of people hit that point. And I think a lot of the people that hit that point who want out of their corrupt systems and out of their exploitative businesses that they're working for don't think that there's a way out. And so they take the great way out, which is to leave this world behind completely. Some of them leave this world behind by just living in media, right? Living in fantasy like Rudius. But a lot of them leave this world with a bullet or a razor blade. And there's a solution that isn't that drastic nuclear option. The solution is, well, how about this? If you think you're already gonna die, then what do you have to lose? You're gonna be in a slow death working your shit retail job for the rest of your goddamn life? Telling yourself you're an artist? Bullshit. Die now a little bit. Take a week, take a month. Fill your fridge up with food. Quit your job and try to pursue your passion. Try to build your own business. Try to do it while you're in your job. You know, maybe don't quit your job. Keep your safety net, whatever. But try it. And know that the risk is there. Yeah, you might end up starving or dying. And that means you'll be at the exact same place you're in. Because if your life is hell, it can only go up from here. It can only go up from here. Go to rock bottom. And keep this in mind, because if you haven't hit rock bottom yet, you will. You will hit rock bottom. And you'll have a choice. It's to lay down and die, or to get up and go. And I say go. So I hope one of you hears me. I hope one of you hears me. Any one of you. Get up and go. You don't have to throw it all away like I did. That was maybe silly, but I also think you do. Because in the myths that I care about, like Akagi is a grand myth for me. In the first act that he does in that show, he has to floor the vehicle in order to go over the cliff and get past the rocks that are waiting at the bottom and safely into the water on the other side. And I think if you let anything hold you back, it's like a parachute holding the car back. And you'll just tip over the cliff and drop into the rocks and fail and die. I think you have to cut it all off. I think you have to be willing to die completely. I think you have to be willing to push up against the wall hard enough that you smash into it and disintegrate and become something other than what you are. I think you have to become a new person. You have to integrate a new way of being with yourself, like the Sandevistan inside your spine. And maybe it will kill you. And maybe you'll die if you don't do it anyway. So maybe it's worth it. Die now instead of a long, slow, painful death. Maybe. Oh, I forgot about it. Oh, yeah. Fucking Balbazak. God, I forgot about Balbazak the Great. It's like the best comment that I've gotten in weeks. I don't mean that as any shade against all the other people who've commented, but sometimes you see a piece of text that somebody's written, you're just like, insight. Wow. Balbazak the Great writes, the fundamental contradiction of capitalism is that competition, the thing that is supposed to drive innovation and make things better and cheaper for the consumer, eventually leads to monopoly, which in turn destroys all competition and its beneficial effects. The fundamental contradiction of Marxism is that the instant you take a worker out of the factory and put him on the Politburo, he ceases to be a member of the proletariat and becomes part of the ruling class, with his own class motivations at odds with that of the workers. With all due respect to Marx, the former problem can at least partially be addressed with regulation. I have no idea how you can possibly address the latter issue. Seems to be an inherent and fatal flaw in the system. My response was just, what the fuck, man? Where have you been to help me understand this shit? Please continue. I will talk about your comment in the future. What the hell? And yeah, exactly that. Because this is exactly my point, is that something about every time we've tried communism, and I won't claim to understand what it is, spirals out into immediate destruction. And something about capitalism is still limping along and hurting people, but it's still going. Still working. Systems of hierarchy and authority and power and evil and greed and corruption. Still working. And when I say working, I mean working. Because if you're watching this, you're doing so from a phone or a computer, and you have internet access, and that means you probably live in a capitalist system. Because the places that aren't capitalist aren't doing so well. They're falling apart fast. And I had a discussion with this about this with somebody who called themselves Tay-sama in my Discord, who came in and basically said that they wanted to debate me in good faith and then did no such thing. But I responded in as much good faith as I could, and they brought up Venezuela and Bolivia as examples of functioning non-capitalist systems. Pretty funny. Look up human rights violations in Venezuela if you'd like. A system that seems to be doing great. And if it's going so well, move there. Go support the system that you believe in. I believe in capitalism, so I think I'm going to stay in capitalist countries. Or at least I believe in market economies, so I'll stay in market countries and maybe mixed socialist economies or something along those lines. I'm not sure what exactly is right. And so, thank you so much, Balbazak. Holy shit. At least the capitalist system is limping along, so maybe there's something to it. And then I've got this book. This is The Proposed Roads to Freedom by Bertrand Russell. Oh, and I bought a bunch of politics books, and then this one got recommended to me somehow by some algorithm somewhere. I was like, what is that? I mean, I like Bertrand Russell. I like his mathematical leanings toward things and his ability to evaluate things from a deeply scientific and like truly logician's perspective. So I'll buy this tiny little pamphlet of a book, and the first moments of it just absolutely evaluate the problem so effectively. Introduction. The attempt to conceive imaginatively a better ordering of human society than the destructive and cruel chaos in which mankind has hitherto existed is by no means modern. It is at least as old as Plato, whose Republic set the model for the utopias of subsequent philosophers. Whoever contemplates the world in the light of an ideal, whether what he seeks be intellect, or art, or love, or simple happiness, or altogether, must feel a great sorrow in the evils that men needlessly allow to continue, and if he be a man of force and vital energy, an urgent desire to lead men to the realization of the good which inspires his creative vision. It is this desire which has been the primary force moving the pioneers of socialism and anarchism as it moved the inventors of ideal commonwealths in the past. And to say ideal commonwealths, the inventors of ideal commonwealths is to say democracies, right? Commonwealths, egalitarian systems of governance and economy. And capitalist ones. In this, there is nothing new. What is new in socialism and anarchism is that close relation of the ideal to the present sufferings of men, which has enabled powerful political movements to grow out of the hopes of solitary thinkers. It is this that makes socialism and anarchism important, and it is this that makes them dangerous to those who batten, consciously or unconsciously, upon the evils of our present order of society. The great majority of men and women in ordinary times pass through life without ever contemplating or criticizing, as a whole, either their own conditions or those of the world at large. They find themselves born into a certain place in society, and they accept what each day brings forth without any effort of thought beyond what the immediate present requires. Almost as instinctively as the beasts of the field, they seek the satisfaction of the needs of the moment without much forethought, and without considering that by sufficient effort the whole conditions of their lives could be changed. They accept what each day brings forth, your shopping cart job, without any effort of thought beyond what the immediate present requires. Almost as instinctively as the beasts of the field, they seek the satisfaction of the needs of the moment without much forethought, and without considering that by sufficient effort, by being willing to starve or experiencing pain, you might say, the whole conditions of their lives could be changed. A certain percentage, guided by personal ambition, something which is bolstered most effectively, I believe, by capitalism, but we'll see what Bertrand argues as I read through this later, make the effort of thought and will which is necessary to place themselves among the more fortunate members of the community. But very few among these are seriously concerned to secure for all the advantages which they seek for themselves. It is only a few rare and exceptional men who have that kind of love toward mankind at large that makes them unable to endure patiently the general mass of evil and suffering, regardless of any relation it may have to their own lives. These few, driven by sympathetic pain, will seek, first in thought and then in action, for some way of escape, some new system of society by which life may become richer, more full of joy, and less full of preventable evils than it is at present. But in the past, such men have, as a rule, failed to interest the very victims of the injustices which they wished to remedy. The more unfortunate sections of the population have been ignorant, apathetic from excess of toil and weariness, timorous through the imminent danger of immediate punishment by the holders of power, and morally unreliable owing to the loss of self-respect resulting from their degradation. To create among such classes any conscious, deliberate effort after general amelioration might have seemed a hopeless task, and indeed in the past it has generally proved so, but the modern world, by the increase of education and the rise in the standard of comfort among wage earners, has produced new conditions, more favorable than ever to the demand for radical reconstruction. It is above all the socialists, and in a lesser degree the anarchists, chiefly as the inspirers of syndicalism, who have become the exponents of this demand. And there's a whole lot in here. Syndicalism and socialism are what he represents. What is syndicalism? Well, it's labor unions. That's what it is. It's a capitalist system where laborers also have the means of expressing their need for change. I just want to check something. Coupe strike. This is in Canada that's happening right now. The government blinked. Oh, they repealed the Bill 28. Good. Sweet. So, what happened over the past week was that about 55,000 education workers in Ontario, Canada, threatened to walk off the job on Friday and have a walk-off strike in schools and just prevent all the schools from running by walking away. And they demanded something like I think it was like an 11% increase in wages. Immediately, the government attempted to put into action a notwithstanding clause, which was threatening trade unionism in the first place and making it illegal to be walking off in the first place. So essentially illegalizing the organization. Very quickly, the government rescinded that bill, repealed it, and now the strike is over. Having repealed the legislation in good faith and having repealed the walk-off in good faith, perhaps the government and the bargaining committees will be able to bargain effectively with Coupe, with the workers, to produce some sort of raise to their wages, which they deserve, frankly. That is a system of social laborers working together, having pride in their work, and organizing in order to produce results and change. Not by destroying a capitalist system, but by working within it. Because there are ways to hamstring capitalism, and they come from the people, and we need more of them. And so I'm with Bertrand Russell when he's talking about syndicalism, and I'm with Bertrand Russell when he's talking about socialism, because what I think he will mean is providing effectively, regulatedly, legally, with legislation, and with tax money that comes disproportionately from people who earn a disproportionate amount of the wealth. But I don't know that much about tax economies, so I won't speak too much to it. Providing people with social welfare, the ability to fulfill their bottom of the Maslow's hierarchies. And what I think that would mean is I think that would mean that the artist who is the cashier, who is currently a cashier and not an artist, because he's not doing the art, he's doing the cashiering. I think that if he didn't have to work, a full-time job in order to just survive, he could be an artist full-time. And I think he would. And I think we argue that people don't know what's good for them, which I think is true, but people don't know how to pursue what they're passionate about. And I think that's just false. I think as soon as people get their fundamentals in order, they start finding out what they really love and pursuing it as much as possible. So I think that there are ways to get our fundamentals in order. And I don't think they have to do with upsetting the apple cart of capitalism. I think they have to do with altering it and fixing it and weeding out some of the horrifying and really deep-seated corruption that's in our systems. And maybe that means a full revamp of some of the American systems. And certainly it means a separation of business and state. And this is an idea that I put forward, and I'd like to put it forward in speech now, because speaking something out into the world makes it real in a way. And I'd like this to become the seed of a real idea. Many, many, many years ago, our founding fathers decided that church and state should be separate. Because if they were not so, the church would run the state and the state would run the church. And the church would lose its value and the state would lose its value, and the both would become flawed inherently. I say now that they were correct, first off, and I think that's obvious and self-evident, that separating the church from the state is very good idea. But they missed something even more fundamental, which is that business, economy, and state should be separate, because one is supposed to be managing and restricting the other. The government is supposed to be a system of rules and regulations that restrict the economy, right? That prevent monopoly, that prevent corruption, that are the systems of rules and legislation that prevent things from going out of control economically, because economies go out of control. As Balbazac the Great said, or whatever, I'm sorry about your name, as that individual said, capitalism spirals toward monopoly and exploitation. Duh. Like, of course it does. Every system has flaws, but you can fix them. It's like every car breaks down, but you can, if you're a good mechanic and you have a good system of checking your vehicle, you can maintain your vehicle, right? All you have to do is go in and brush the rust off of the system. And rust is corruption. It's entropy. It's falling apart. It's oxidation. And our systems oxidize, especially when they're in contact with the chaos that is people. And the economy is in contact with a lot of people, and it gets corrupt really fast. So our systems of regulation for it have to be separate from it. Because if they're all intermingled, they can't criticize each other. It's like if you have a codependent relationship with somebody, you can't see them effectively. You're all integrated with yourself, and you can't evaluate yourself effectively. It's why we need therapists, and it's why we need friends. We need somebody else to bounce off of, somebody who's got principles, somebody who's got training, who knows what they're doing and can point out when we're going too far or not going far enough or doing something wrong. And our government doesn't do that to our economies because they're integrated. Because the economy is able to slip its tendrils and its parasitic vines and roots and runners into the government. And I think if there were a clear-cut legal distinction, a hard line drawn between economy and state, the opposite of what is done in places like China, further in the direction of separating the state from the economy, I think it might have the potential to fix a whole bunch of things all at once. But it's just an idea. It's barely even a theory. So I'm just putting it out there. I'm not saying that it's the best idea ever, but something about it, as soon as I had it, was like separation of business and state. Pff, that's compelling. Wouldn't that work? How much of our flawed legislation and regulation comes from giant corporations lobbying or putting money toward political candidates? Like all of it, as far as I can, like all of it. Like almost all of it seems to be corruption at that level. For that reason. Revolving door, Monsanto owns most of the corn in the country and continues to get subsidies for corn. Fucking the broadband service providers and cable companies have their own monopolies, essentially, that are just bad and really fucked up and are really restricting our country's ability to move forward into the future in technological terms. If only we could separate the state from the economy and keep the state strong enough to hold the economy back. Couldn't that be something of a set of checks and balances, of separated systems that might be actually effective? I think it might. And I think we need a new sort of legislation and regulation in the form of systems design, electronic systems design, systems that are built upon principles and rules of equivalent exchange and of fairness. Because our legal systems are all paper and people, and they're slow. But digital systems are fast. And so something like a set of Ethereum contracts that lays out a DAO, that an autonomous organization that structures in all of these elements effectively, could be really, really powerful. And I'd love to see that future evolve. And the thing that I'm confident in is that, well, here's what I'm confident in. I'm confident in the social evolution of better systems. The monarchies are all dying, or dead already. All of them. All of the dynastic monarchies are dead or dying. Why? Do you think it's just because people revolted? I don't. I think it's because democracies are literally more effective. And so they die out, like evolution. Nations that have monarchies don't do that well. Parliamentary systems, democracies, representative democracies, things like that, do pretty well. As time progresses, the great fascist systems, North Korea, parts of China, will fall apart, and they will fall apart. I'm not worried about it. I mean, I'm worried about it because they might nuke other people first, and when that might be bad, but you know, Hello? Oh, shit. All right, thank you. They left my boxes in the rain. Listen, I don't remember where I was at because I got interrupted, so I'm sorry for that. I'm sure I was on some discussion of the way forward or something like it. And I think it's relevant. I think it's all relevant. I really do. And I'll parse through it and I'll edit out anything that I don't think was relevant. Just to save you time.
Now that I have edited the video, I can put it up on Patreon and make the fools pay for